President Trump commemorated Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery today by laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The president also spoke at Baltimore's Fort McHenry National Monument for another Memorial Day event. It comes after the Trump administration imposed new restrictions on travel from Brazil to the U.S. The country has become a hotspot for coronavirus infections in Latin America. Paula Reed has more.
Brazil is currently seeing a spike in COVID cases, and starting on Friday, the Trump administration will block the entry of non-U.S. citizens who have been to Brazil in the preceding 2 weeks. The administration is also considering additional travel restrictions and says it will evaluate other countries on an individual basis.
National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien told Face the Nation that he hopes the restrictions won't be in place for long.
We hope that'll be temporary, but because of the situation in Brazil, we're going to take every step necessary to protect the American people.
Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has downplayed the severity of the virus and just this weekend mingled with anti-lockdown protesters in the nation's capital. As of this weekend, Brazil had over 360,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, second only to the United States. As the number of Americans who have died from COVID nears 100,000, President Trump headed to his golf resort in Sterling, Virginia on Saturday and Sunday. He could be seen in close contact with golfers and not wearing a mask. His outing was consistent with his push to reopen America. On Friday, he declared churches essential and called on them to open their doors.
If they don't do it, I will override the governors. In America, we need more prayer, not less.
One New Jersey church defied state orders this weekend and opened to parishioners. The state's Governor Phil Murphy said services should resume only when it's safe to do so.
I would hope we'd get to houses of worship sooner than later, but we want to make sure we do it right, responsibly, and that we don't kill anybody by doing it too fast.
When pressed on whether worship services could help spread the virus, White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx urged caution for those at highest risk.
Although it may be safe for some to go to churches and social distance, it may not be safe for those with pre-existing conditions.
Paula Reed, CBS News.
Zeke Miller is following the latest from the White House. He's a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Hi, Zeke. Great to see you. So the president is taking some heat for golfing this Memorial weekend. It's the first time he's played in more than 2 months, and it is as the coronavirus death toll in the U.S. nears 100,000. Is the White House at all concerned about the optics?
You know, some in the White House do say they are concerned. They're particularly concerned given that President Trump had been particularly critical of his predecessor, President Barack Obama, who also had a big golf habit, was an avid golfer, and would golf at times that were often politically inopportune. And then candidate Trump or private citizen Trump would criticize him for that. So there is a concern, some concern among the president's staffers that he's open to a charge of being hypocritical here and potentially insensitive as the U.S. appears on the brink of hitting that 100,000 death toll threshold.
And Zeke, last week, the Labor Department reported a staggering 25 million Americans have filed for unemployment. 2.4 million of those are first-time filers. So how is the president framing the economic downturn as he campaigns for re-election?
Well, right now, it's a lot of, just ignore the current situation you're in right now. That's the president's message. It's going to hurt. It's a short-term pain for long-term gain, essentially. Trust me, it's his message to voters that come November, come 2021, their lives will be a lot better. That is not necessarily, that's a very ambitious time frame for an economic recovery, and one that is not yet supported by economic data or public surveys of consumer confidence or the best expertise of economists who worry that this deep economic recession that the economy has found its way into because of the coronavirus won't be so quick to ease. Yes, there will be a short-term easing as businesses reopen right now, but the longer-term economic impact of this will be significant and continue. We heard from one of the president's economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, essentially predicting double-digit unemployment come November when the president's finding himself on the ballot. And that, is sort of a marker which generally doesn't bode well for presidents seeking re-election. But the president is sort of trying to message it as give him a one-time pass because of the coronavirus, and hoping that voters will not blame him for their economic conditions right now, as long as he's promising a recovery down the line.
And Zeke, 2 weeks ago, the White House urged governors to ensure that every nursing home resident and staff member be tested for COVID-19 within 14 days. A very tall order indeed. So are any states meeting that goal?
We've seen some states meet it. We've seen a bunch of states try, and a lot of states have said essentially they can't, they didn't even bother trying because they didn't think they could meet it. That is sort of a troubling aspect, and we asked Deborah Birx about this at the White House on Friday when she held a briefing. She said she wasn't too concerned about it. She wanted to focus more on the states that had met that goal rather than the ones that hadn't, as an aspirational one. But that was a critical directive from the White House Coronavirus Task Force to nursing homes, because they have been, the source of so many of these serious illnesses and death during the course of this pandemic, that the White House and the federal government as a whole wanted that to be prioritized. And it is striking to hear from states that have not even tried to meet that. And that sort of is in a way symptomatic of the broader administration's approach toward testing and the like. We've seen just in the last couple of days the administration turn over to Congress its national testing strategy, which had been mandated by some of the coronavirus legislation, and it essentially leaves all the decision making up to the states. The White House will issue guidance and recommendations, but as we've just seen here with this nursing home one, that doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be followed through, and it could have disastrous ramifications.
Testing today has certainly been a very difficult nut to crack. Zeke, earlier today, the president called out North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, demanding Cooper allow the Republican National Convention's plan to convene there this August. What can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously, it's a Democratic governor in a battleground state, one which the president carried before, is looking to carry once again. And there's a real, timetable here that the president wants to hold this convention in that state towards the end of August. But what we've seen in North Carolina and a lot of other states, there are still going to be potentially some prohibition on large gatherings, in-person gatherings, whatever the size of the venue, until there's a vaccine. Here in Washington, D.C., the mayor's guidance says until there is a vaccine, they're probably going to limit gatherings to 250 people. A convention, even if you pare down all the alternates and the guests and the media to just a critical contingent there, you're still talking north of 1,000 people, probably north of 2,000 people all told. That is a potential concern from a public health standpoint in absence of the vaccine. But what the president is asking for here is certainty one way or the other. They're contracting deadlines, and there's potential for maybe moving the Republican convention to a more friendly state with a Republican governor. But all of that, would have severe cost in terms of resources. But also, from the president's standpoint, the worst thing that could happen for him, in a way, would be the convention becoming the source of further infection going into his reelection. So that is one of the other concerns that the president's going to have to balance.
Absolutely. And Zeke, the president also tweeted about schools and wanting schools opened as soon as possible, echoing, interestingly, a cable news host's call for the same thing. So does that put the president at odds with the coronavirus task force?
No, absolutely. The guidance from the CDC that was cleared through the coronavirus task force strongly recommends that schools, if they do open in the fall, and recommending that they do open once their state conditions meet specific parameters, to operate at reduced capacity, potentially shifting, do A days and B days to limit the number of students and faculty in the same room at any given time to try to slow the spread of the virus until there is a vaccine. Obviously, we're the last couple of weeks now in the school year up in the Northeast and the South. A lot of schools have already finished up, so schools aren't going to reopen right away. The issue right now for the economy is day camps and summer camps and other ways to occupy students, so the parents can go to work once businesses reopen. But the fall is going to be that real critical test: can schools reopen? And that's going to be a decision that'll be made by individual governors, individual school districts, and mayors. And the president can call and tweet and say he'd like that to happen, but there's a CDC guidance which most of the mayors and governors and local officials said they're going to follow, and that right now points to a very different sort of school year come August, September for a lot of students across this country.
Indeed. All right, Zeke Miller, thank you so much. Always great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.